Hi, welcome back. I'm here with another shadow work topic. I like to pick topics that are kind of pervasive and silent in the background of our lives. They don't usually get acknowledged through mainstream coaches and teachers, something that kind of plagues a lot of us. And so I like to pick the thing that is not always discussed. Or if I pick something that is always discussed, I like to approach it in a new way and it hasn't been said in a way that I've heard said before. My name is Paloma. The reason that I'm able to make these connections and discuss these topics with you is that 5 years ago, I started my own mental health journey, all DIY, and it started off in a very psychological and traditional therapeutic lens that then evolved into spiritual awakening just by the nature of the maze that opened up during this exploration. And I kept a lot of careful journals and I documented my darkest moments, some of my breakthroughs, some of the connections that I made. This channel is a way that I can share this with you all in hopes that you have your own breakthroughs. This is not for me to tell you what to think, but to open up discussions and things for you to ponder and sit with and then see, does this fit? Does this work? When I apply what is being said, how do I feel? That's the only thing that matters here. So today I'm going to talk about an underlying dissatisfaction that I came to realize that I had in my own life. Then I had to think about, well, where did this come from? What clues were there that I had been living with this underlying dissatisfaction? And what am I doing about it now? Starting with, where do I believe this stems from? When I feel into this, I recognize that it's been with me always. I just didn't always really know it was there because it became kind of a baseline default way of living and feeling. But definitely well into childhood have I felt dissatisfied with life. I feel like part of it is that it's a way of preventing myself from being let down. And so I don't get my hopes up. You know, I have low expectations of life, so I don't get my hopes up and then get my heart broken. And it's just been a learned baseline of consciousness for me. How I became aware was actually last weekend. I went to an Abraham Hicks workshop in Kansas City, and somebody had gone up to ask Abraham a question. And during the intermission, I saw them at the water cooler and I went to go talk to them. And they asked if they could give me a reading. And they told me, your guides want you to know that you must deal with the shadow of being dissatisfied with life. And when they said that, I had the moment of, yes, you just named a pattern that I didn't have a name for, or I didn't fully see what was going on. Looking back at clues that this was the case, let's say that you didn't have a reader come up and tell you this. How could you know that this might apply to you? I think one of the things is, if I'm paying attention to the questions that I had been asking, I have a lot of very gifted psychic friends. I'm super lucky in that sense. So I get to talk to spiritual community all the time. And some of the questions that I had been asking them, things like, I feel like my life isn't progressing. What can I do to start feeling like things are moving forward? Other questions were, you know, we're wrapping up the year. What else do I have left to do this year so that I can complete what I was meant to do this year? I'm feeling ringing right now in my ear. Thank you. Another question is, I would ask, how can I feel more complete? You know, so that implies that I feel incomplete. How can I feel complete with what is? Because I had enough wisdom to know that in this question of asking, how can I make my life move forward? I know that wherever you go, there you are. So how can I feel complete in this moment? And other little clues were, for example, even on my days off, I was napping excessively, or I do like to sleep in on days off, but there would be times where I wasn't even sleepy anymore and I would just stay in bed, and I'm like avoiding starting the day and greeting the day and getting the day going. The thing is that there's nothing really wrong with my life. I have so much beauty and so much to be grateful for in my life. And so when I became aware that I had this dissatisfaction, then there was guilt associated with that. And it is that guilt. I don't have anything to complain about. Why am I making up something to complain about? This, I remembered a journal entry, and I'm actually going to read you the journal entry from Mount Shasta. So earlier this year, I went to Mount Shasta, and When I came back, I journaled and reflected about it, and that was a sentiment of mine of feeling guilty about. I'll just go ahead and read you what I wrote. So, when I landed in Oregon is when the excitement really took off, especially the drive to California. I was giggling, singing, randomly screaming. I was trying not to be hard on myself for being down when the world is so beautiful and so good to me. I saw the irony of doing shrooms, spiraling constantly, trying to soothe my panic attack as a way to feel the truth within. Meanwhile, all I have to do is step outside of the four walls of my home. It's so simple. Follow your joy. This news is fantastic news. Life gets better instantly, and it doesn't stop getting better. I see it happen. The beautiful synchronicities showing me that I am not alone, that all my prayers are held and heard, and yet I fall into old patterns, into scarcity, rumination, worry, escaping through fantasy, the deliciousness, no, the delicious now that's here to love me and hold me. And still I tell myself it's okay, there's no judgment, just keep coming back. What I want is to let thoughts and ego go and surrender completely to the moment, to do this in gratitude and reverence for how beautiful life treats me. The nature of reality, this holographic universe, is so loving, so graceful. I want to accept its love and gifts by not longing for anything outside of me, not worrying or criticizing or strategizing. So I choose this, and I will keep choosing this. You can feel really guilty about not always being fully appreciative, because when you're in lack, there's something that you're not appreciating. And then knowing that this is true and still trying to have compassion with myself and not judge myself for choosing less than ideal perspectives. Okay. What if there's another way to be? Like, yes, that's wonderful. I think that that's, if this is you, I think that just starting with not judging yourself for the feeling that you have some kind of discontent is great. But what if there could be another way to be, where you jump out of bed and you're excited to start the day, and you're excited to greet life, and this could be the default, and like, is it so wrong for you to want that? Is it so wrong for you to want to be excited by life? Realize that the key is not waiting for better days and not looking behind to when you thought that life was better, but that cliche of living in the moment, of being here in the present moment. It's really true that this is kind of the antidote, because when you are in touch with that dimension that is fully connected to the universe, which you can reach in meditation, you want nothing, you lack nothing when you reach this state. The idea behind active meditation is that it eliminates that separation between spirituality and the mundane life, because that's kind of another trap. And Ram Dass talks about this, talks about how when he first started doing psychedelics, he would reach these really high levels of consciousness. And so many of us can relate with this, with spirituality. And you have these like cacao ceremonies and these heart opening experiences, and you go in community with people who are just so sweet and so lovely and understand you right away. And then you go back home and you're in your regular daily life, and now you feel like you've been brought down. So that's what Ram Dass would talk about. He would say that he would living as this like saint in these high states, and then he would go home and his family would say something to him like, so do you have a job? And that would like trigger him so much, and he's like, oh, you're bringing me down. And he thought it was about staying high all the time, where he started to realize that freedom is not about always being high, but it's about being free in form. And that's what I want more than anything, is to be free. This conversation is going to take some twists and turns, so bear with me. But we're just going to keep going deeper and deeper. So we're talking now about being in the present moment, and why active meditation is so helpful for this. Because what active meditation is having stillness within you and being connected to the deeper dimension with you, but moving around and doing things. And it's different than someone who practices just regular meditation, because sometimes we can compartmentalize that. Not that it's not helpful. For me, when I have the best feeling days, when I feel the most connected, when I'm not in that dissatisfied state, it is the days that I have chosen to start my day from the time that I wake up in a conscious state, meaning that I've either done a mini meditation, or I made a crystal grid before work, or I made a golden milk concoction and I prayed into it. And those little intentions, they set the tone for the day, that my entire day I'm going to be living in these two realms simultaneously. That is what helps me feel good, happy, grounded, centered, and engaged in the now. It's about not escaping the reality, but leaning into it and fully making what you do pleasurable. And I think it was Deborah Silverman who says, whistle while you work. Well, no, she's not the one who says that. That's Snow White. But yeah, whistle while you work, and my mind is going and I'm like, yes, this is it. That's why I have, what do I have? Rahu in my 6th house and my North Node in my 6th house. Because for me, I need to be very engaged with the day to day and stop trying to escape into my fantasy world, which is so rich and very pleasurable for me, where real life is really a drag. When I also see that this has been a learned pattern that I have conditioned into myself, I can also have more compassion. Eckhart talked about this a little bit in a different example, but it's the same concept. He talked about the idea of delayed gratification, which is actually something else that I do too. Someone who's like very self-responsible. But he talks about how it seems like a great idea and like it makes a lot of sense of have discipline now and work towards your goal. Seems like it's prudent, it's mature, but what ends up happening is that you do all of that work and then you get to the place in life where you were striving so hard to get to, and you get there and you don't know how to enjoy it because the only thing that you've practiced your entire life is delayed gratification. And so all you know is that exactly is delay. Then you can just substitute in satisfaction for that. And you've been practicing dissatisfaction. And so when you're wanting to break out of it, it's tough because that's what you've been practicing, but it's not impossible. It's just a rewiring and a relearning that needs to happen. An unlearning, I guess. What is the opposite of that, right? It's the indulging in the sweetness of life of what's already here and not wanting more and more and more, but let me stop and appreciate what I do already have. That's a huge, powerful practice that you have to be consciously choosing, because otherwise your default will not take you there. So you can set up reminders, or what helps me is to, like I said, start my day on that note, because it just sets the tempo for everything else that's to come. So I'm making these connections and this is all great. I'm going to take us a level deeper. So at the end of this day, when I'm thinking like, yeah, this is it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to really be serious about what I do every single day and treat it like it's the only thing that matters. I'm reading Autobiography of a Yogi. I know I've been reading it for a long time, but it's because I've been rereading chapters. I savor, I literally cry every single time. I'm going slow on purpose. I'm not flying by this book because I love it so much. And so I'm reading this book, and Sri Yukteswar, I think I'm saying that right, Yukteswar. He tells Yogananda that in a vision that he needs to learn how to differentiate between dream and reality. And when I read that, my eyes got big, because all day I had been coming to these conclusions about how I need to focus on my reality. And now what Sri Yukteswar meant was that this life is a dream and reality is the astral. This was another like aha moment and another connection for me, because it is a dream, but just because it's a dream doesn't mean that one can become nihilistic and say, well, it doesn't matter anyway, it's meaningless, and so I'm not going to engage. What would it matter if I did X, Y, or Z if it's a dream anyway? Which is another route that can happen in spirituality. And when you start to kind of look into the reality of things, that's an option that you can take. But take it and then tell me how satisfied you feel with your life, how happy you feel when you take that route and that point of view. Because that's your gauge, right? For me, I see it as, okay, I have just become conscious. I mean, I've known that I've read the Four Agreements. Don Miguel Ruiz, he talks about how to navigate reality as a dream state. And I've read it many years ago and I've read it again in the Love Mastery and everything. So it's not like this is the first time I'm realizing this, but it's again coming back at this exact moment when I'm pondering how to interact with life. And to me, it's becoming lucid within the dream. Again, consciousness shifts, so you can become lucid and you can become unconscious, and we're constantly moving through these states throughout the day. So now I've become conscious. Okay, I am dreaming that I am this 30-year-old woman who is subtly dissatisfied with life. Why? Now that's interesting, right? Why am I dreaming that? Why have I picked this dream? Why do I want to experience this? And now there's a separation between that dissatisfaction and my identification with it. And that separation makes a world of difference because now you're not lost in it or consumed by it. Maybe the idea isn't that you break away from the dream, it's not that you stop dreaming, but that you just lean into it and become conscious of everything that you do and how sacred everything you do is. And I am feeling emotional at this moment, so let me take a few breaths. You know, I had another aha moment of like, okay, this is why I like travel so much, because when I'm traveling, I'm really immersed in my environment. I'm looking at the architecture really carefully and I'm looking at the menu and savoring all of the food, and because everything's new. And what if I could bring that same level of pleasure into just my day-to-day? And I think that that's where the true tantra is. Reminding yourself that you are the architect of your life and you're at full control for just how sweet your life is. Become lucid about that fact again so that you can have free will. Because when you're not conscious, there's no free will. So your only task is your own well-being. That's what you're in control of. You're the architect of your life. And we could even go a little bit deeper into non-dualism. You know, there is no doer, and so you can't get it wrong, and all paths lead home. I think that will get its own separate video. Something that helped me to really grasp this too was actually Alice in Wonderland. I watched the Tim Burton version, and there was a scene where Alice goes, "This is my dream." And she says something like, "Ever since I got here, I've been told who to be, pinched, poked, prodded." I don't remember what else she says, but basically she's like, "But this is my dream. I'm Alice because I say I'm Alice." And I remember watching that and I had like a whole journal of notes about the symbolism. It helped me to solidify that within myself too, to become lucid within myself as well. I do want to add one thing about the non-dualism and the no-doer. You start to see that everything that you do, even becoming conscious and losing consciousness, becoming lucid and losing lucidity, it's a part of not just your dream, but God's dream. And then it can be no other way. So that really absolves you, you know, because it could be no other way. The point of this, besides how fun it is to make these connections, this is actually what I live for. It's my favorite thing to do, is to have these like breakthroughs and piece together the things that I learn into my own understanding. But even further than that, something that you can apply and take home, hopefully would make your life better, is just the concept of realizing that whatever struggle you're up against, you have created this. And that's not to feel guilt about, or like, oh, we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't have incarnated if all of us were dreaming the perfect dream. That's why we've come back, so that we can iron it out and start choosing better feeling things and start to care about how we feel and choosing the things that are more empowering, and seeing that even if you are dreaming a less than ideal dream according to your own standards, that that's part of it too, that's part of the learning process. and that every single moment is a fresh start, that you can make a new choice. And if you choose again to indulge, if you choose suffering again, if you choose the thing that hurts again, that's okay. It could be no other way. And it will only continue as long as it needs to. And you are in control of that. And that's scary, but also great news. All right, I'm sending so much love. I'm going to leave you with this today. More to come.